During the Second World War, in the Austrian city of Linz, the birthplace of Adolf Hitler, it was meant to be more than a museum, a monumental temple of Nazi culture, the radiant heart of the Great Linz, the cultural capital of Hitler's imagined empire. Its exhibits were to embody the ideals of Nazism, masterpieces seized from across occupied Europe. At the center of this collection were the treasures taken from the Viennese homes of one of Europe's most influential families, a family whose roots reached back to the 16th century, and whose name still opens doors today. Some called them patrons of art and science. Others whispered about a secret government guiding nations. Their wealth was uncertain, their privacy absolute, but their surname was known to everyone. If you enjoy these journeys, a like and a subscription mean more than you think. They directly keep this channel alive, and I'd love to hear from you too. Where are you listening from, and what time is it right now? Now together we till slip into the journey. You stand in a dim warehouse on the outskirts of Linz, 1944. The air is heavy with the cold scent of pine crates stacked to the ceiling. On each box a number written in black paint. 1732, 2451, 3017. Beneath the wood sleep the stolen paintings of the Rothschilds. Rembrandt faces, porcelain, jeweled clocks once touched by quiet hands in Vienna. The echo of boots fades. A guard locks the door. Somewhere below, the salt mines wait, ready to swallow all this beauty in silence. You exhale, and the world fades backward 2 centuries. It is the year 1744. The narrow streets of Frankfurt are still lit by oil lamps. You are born behind the city walls. Inside the Judengasse, the Jewish ghetto, the alleys smell of iron, wax, and rain. Above the gate hangs a crude carving called the Judensaw, mocking the people who live within. At night, the gates close with a metallic groan. During Christian holidays, no one is allowed to leave. To walk the market, you must pay a special tax, a fee for protection from a world that never truly protects you. Your father runs a small exchange booth, marked by a red shield painted on a swinging sign. In German, Rothschild. Travelers remember the color more than the name. They come to trade coins, medals, or bits of silver. Inside, you watch your father hold a coin to the light, tilting it, listening to the thin ring that separates gold from fraud. You learn that sound before you can read. When he dies, you keep the sign, that small red shield, and the name stays with you. Years pass. It is 1756. You are 12, and sent to study under Jacob Oppenheimer, a court Jew who manages the finances of princes. Here you touch money that once belonged to kings. You learn to weigh trust, to count faster than the men who command armies. You study how a single wrong figure can change the fortune of a state. 4 years later, your parents are gone, and you return to Frankfurt to reopen the modest booth with its red emblem. You sign your name now and forever as Mayer Amschel Rothschild. Your fingers turn black with the dust of old coins and medals. Collectors come, nobles, officers, even the Landgrave Wilhelm Efron of Hesse-Kassel, born 1743, ruler of a small principality. He loves antiquities. And you, the quiet merchant from the ghetto, find them for him. One day he offers you a position, court agent. Your task is simple: make the prince richer. Your reward a share of profit, and the peril of failure you accept. It is 1770. You marry Gutelle Schnapper, 17, intelligent and composed. The marriage brings a dowry that becomes the foundation of your first real bank. Within 10 years, your family has 10 children, 5 sons, 5 daughters, and a business that grows as quickly as your household. Meanwhile, across the sea, the Industrial Revolution in Britain changes everything. English mills flood Europe with bright, cheap cloth. In Frankfurt, new firms rush to import these fabrics. You join them, sending your restless son Nathan to London. You write letters full of instruction. Be precise, my dear boy. Our partners complain about delays, but Nathan works by instinct, not order. He moves fast, buys faster, and though he worries you, his timing will soon outpace all of Europe. By the late 18th century, your red-shield house has become a true bank. Outside, the ghetto walls still stand, but their gates are loosening. People speak your name with both envy and need. You lend, invest, collect. And each night, as the lamps go out, you listen to the quiet breathing of a city that has yet to understand how gold and patience can shape the fate of nations. Somewhere, centuries ahead, the crates in Linz are waiting. But for now, you keep counting coins, weighing silence against sound, history against memory. The year is 1789, and the world around you trembles. From your narrow street in Frankfurt, you hear rumours carried by merchants, talk of a revolution in France, a king humiliated, a mob surging through the Tuileries, the heads of nobles displayed on pikes. For centuries, wealth meant land, titles, and obedience. But now something new is stirring, power that can be measured in paper, not crowns. You feel it in your fingertips every time you touch a bond, a ledger, or a sealed letter. Gold is heavy, but trust, that is weightless, and yet harder to hold. Inside your counting house, the air is thick with the smell of ink and candle smoke. Stacks of ledgers rise beside you, each one filled in your neat hand, names, numbers, dates. The handwriting of survival, the walls creak with winter wind, and somewhere beyond them, Europe changes. Your client, Landgrave Wilhelm IX of Hesse, now one of the richest men in the Holy Roman Empire, grows nervous. French armies approach. The monarchies of Europe, fearing contagion from Paris, raise their troops in haste. Gold becomes the blood of diplomacy. Kings borrow to fight other kings. And you, a man born behind locked gates, find yourself holding their veins in your ink-stained fingers. When Wilhelm flees north to England in 1795, he leaves his fortune in your hands. He trusts you to protect what cannot be carried, the millions lent to Britain, Austria, and Prussia. He believes his banker will guard it as a priest guards relics. That is when the first myth is born. They say you buried his gold in a chest beneath the cobblestones of Frankfurt. They say you sealed it with wax and oath. The truth is less romantic. The fortune was too vast for any box, and you were but one of many trustees. Still, the story spreads like a blessing. The banker who keeps his client's treasure safe, even as cannon fire shakes the city. That story becomes your shield. And yet, the French arrive. The Republic's troops march through Frankfurt in 1796, carrying banners stitched with slogans of liberty. A bitter irony for a people still confined by walls. But among the decrees of the occupiers lies one that changes everything. Jews may now live beyond the ghetto. For the first time, the gates open not for a funeral or a fire, but for freedom. You step outside at dawn. The stones of the square are wet with rain, and for a moment the city feels wider, almost kind. From this opening grows the empire of your sons. In 1800, across the Channel, your son Nathan Mayer Rothschild writes from London. His letters arrive with damp corners and smudged ink. Father, I have opened a small counting house in St. Saintswithin's Lane. He trades in cloth, dyes, and later in gold. His handwriting is impatient, the loops of his R and M uneven. He complains about English weather, about competitors, about the price of coal. You can hear the city through his words, the clatter of carriages, the hammering of shipyards along the Thames. The younger Rothschilds scatter like sparks. Salomon to Vienna, Karl to Naples, James to Paris, Amschel remaining in Frankfurt. Each carries a fragment of your name and a sealed copy of your will, written in 1810, signed in your cramped hand, declaring that property shall pass only through male heirs, that marriages must remain within the circle, that unity is survival. The rule seems harsh, but in your mind it is mercy. You have seen what envy can do. You know how quickly favour turns to ruin. By the time you die in September 1812, at 68, Napoleon's armies have begun to falter. France's defeat in Russia is the turning of the tide. Your sons gather beneath the roof of the old house with the red sign. They pray, argue, count, and begin again. The story continues in the damp streets of London. 1814. You are Nathan now. The city smells of coal and rain, of soot clinging to every wall. The war with France drags on. The British army under Arthur Wellesley, Duke of Wellington, fights deep in Spain and Portugal, but the treasury is bleeding silver. There are no safe routes to send money across the continent. Every port, every road, every bank is watched by French agents. You walk through the fog of the docks, boots slick with mud, your pocket heavy with sealed letters and coded receipts. Your family's couriers, Jewish traders, smugglers, sailors, move gold piece by piece, hidden in crates of coffee, in barrels of wine. You pay bribes to French officers, invent false invoices, whisper to ship captains who know how to sail by starlight. By 1815, the war nears its end. Napoleon escapes Elba, rallies his army, and faces the Allies one last time at Waterloo. That morning, the fields of Belgium are soaked in fog and gunpowder. In London, the market waits for news. Every rumour changes the price of British bonds. Some traders panic, others pray. You have your own network, horses, boats, and yes, pigeons. Perhaps you receive word before anyone else. Perhaps not. History never agrees. What matters is this: when the battle is lost for France, and victory secured for Britain, you are already at your desk, calm, deliberate, buying what others sell. Within days, the fortune of your house multiplies. Later pamphlets will call it a manipulation, a conspiracy, a trick of the century. But truth is smaller and more human. A man with better couriers, faster boats, and the courage to risk everything when others froze. In 1816, the House of Rothschild becomes the financial spine of Europe. Bonds flow through your ledgers like blood through a heart. You arrange loans for Austria, Prussia, Britain, enormous sums written in careful ink. Your offices smell of leather and wax. Clerks whisper in 4 languages, carrying trays of documents through corridors lined with maps. Every morning begins with the same ritual: a candle lit before the portrait of Mayer, your father, and the silent prayer that the balance will hold. You write to your brothers: no quarrels, no divisions. We are 5 arrows in one hand. In 1822, Emperor Francis I of Austria grants your family the title of Baron. You commission a coat of arms, a fist clutching 5 arrows, bound together so they cannot be broken. Beneath it, the motto in Latin: Concordia integritas, industria, harmony, integrity, industry. Outside, Europe begins to heal. Armies shrink, trade resumes, but within this calm lies another kind of power, quieter, more enduring. Governments now need you not for war, but for peace, to build roads, canals, and bridges, to underwrite bonds that tie nations together. And yet, late at night, as the city sleeps, you sometimes return to the window. You look out across the fog and see reflections, the faint gleam of coins, the shadows of your father's sign still hanging somewhere in Frankfurt, the echo of boots in a warehouse that has not yet been built. Time folds in on itself. You imagine the salt mines of Linz still empty, still waiting. The empire of money, you realize, is not built of marble or law. It is built of memory. The memory of trust kept, of debts repaid, of silence maintained even when the world demands noise. And so you keep writing letters. Your quill scratches softly in the dark, a heartbeat in ink. The city exhales through its chimneys and the century turns beneath your hand. It is 1817, and Europe breathes again. The fields once trampled by Napoleon's armies now bloom with poppies. London glows with gaslight. Paris hums with talk of progress. Yet behind every palace door, kings and ministers still whisper your name, the House of Rothschild. You, Nathan, are 39. The rain never truly stops in this city, and you've grown used to its rhythm. The slow patter on glass, the hiss of wheels over wet cobblestones, The faint metallic scent of ink and coal. Every morning you cross St. Sorathin's Lane, the grey light spilling through the tall windows of your counting house. Clerks already wait at their desks. Ledgers open. Candles flicker against the brass candlesticks engraved with your initials, NMR. The war is over, but its debts remain. Europe is rebuilding, rebalancing, and reborrowing. Armies may have laid down their muskets, but the real battle for credit, for trust, has only begun. Your younger brother James in Paris writes long letters full of excitement and exhaustion. He is 24, fluent in charm and calculation. In one letter he writes, "Paris is hungry again, not for bread, but for elegance. The boulevards fill with carriages, the salons with speculation. We must act before others remember how to dream." You read his words by lamplight and smile. He has your father's patience and your mother's ambition. Across the continent, the five brothers move like the gears of one vast mechanism. Salomon in Vienna manages the delicate loans to the Austrian Empire. Karl watches over Naples, Amschel anchors Frankfurt, while you, Nathan, hold the centre in London. Messages cross the channel daily, thin envelopes sealed in red wax carried by riders, couriers, and the new telegraph lines that hum like distant insects. Each note is precise, coded in family phrases. "Our cousin is unwell" might mean a delayed payment. "The weather in Naples improves" might signal a favourable rate. The network grows faster than any government's mail. A letter from Vienna reaches London in 2 days, from Paris in 1. Sometimes your agents arrive before official dispatches. A diplomat once jokes that the Rothschilds know war and peace an hour before God does. You pretend not to hear, but the truth stirs you. It is 1820. Britain has just faced the panic of 1820. A brief tremor in the markets. Dozens of firms collapse. But your house stands untouched. Why? Because when fear rises, people run toward the hands they trust most. And your hands, steady as stone, never tremble in public. You lend to governments, but also to nations, to cities building bridges, to companies laying rails. Every deal is inked in silence. Every dinner with a minister ends with a sealed promise, a handshake, a whisper. One winter evening, you host a small gathering in your London townhouse. The fire burns low, glasses of port reflect the amber light. Among your guests sits the Prime Minister, Lord Liverpool, and beside him the financier David Ricardo, the philosopher of markets. The conversation turns to bonds and risk. Ricardo smiles and says, "Markets move on rumour, Nathan. You move on certainty." You answer quietly, "Certainty, my friend, is simply rumour delivered faster." Laughter ripples through the room, but the truth lingers between the words. Across Europe, your family's influence expands like the lines on a map. In 1821, the Rothschilds arrange a monumental loan for Austria, 22 million florins, the lifeblood that keeps an empire afloat. The emperor himself, Francis I, grants your family the title of Freiherr Barons of the Austrian crown. Soon after, your coat of arms is unveiled, 5 arrows in a clenched fist. It hangs above every branch office, in London, Paris, Frankfurt, Vienna, and Naples. A quiet reminder that divided, you are nothing, together, unbreakable. The motto, Concordia, Integritas, Industria, feels like a prayer whispered through the centuries. Harmony, integrity, industry. In 1825, crisis strikes again, the banking panic born from the bursting bubble of Latin American speculation. Dozens of British banks collapse. Even the mighty Bank of England trembles. Short of gold, you act before dawn, sending couriers racing through the fog, carriages loaded with your gold roll to Threadneedle Street. By midday, the bank's vaults are filled again, and confidence restored. The governor shakes your hand. "Mr. Rothschild, you have saved us." You reply, "Then let us both pretend it was simple." Time presses on. In 1830, revolutions bloom again. In Paris, in Belgium, in Poland, barricades rise, kings flee. You watch from your study in London, reading reports by candlelight. The smell of melting wax mixes with the ink on your fingers. Each uprising shifts the value of money like wind on a sail. You move your funds before the gusts arrive. When your agents ask for guidance, you write the same line your father once wrote to you. Be patient. Never be the first to panic. That autumn, you visit Paris to meet James. The two of you stand on a balcony overlooking the new Boulevard des Capucines, the city glowing with oil lamps and restless ambition. James speaks of art, of beauty, of building a new house that would rival any palace in France. He shows you a sketch, tall ceilings, marble staircases, paintings from every century. You smile but say nothing. You know what he truly seeks. Not splendor, but permanence. In the years that follow, the Rothschilds move beyond banking. 1835. Contracts for railroads in Austria. 1836. Investments in mining and steel. 1838. The first joint ventures between London and Paris, financed with handwritten guarantees that cross borders faster than armies. Each signature adds another thread to the invisible web binding Europe's economy. Diplomats sign treaties. Your family signs the loans that make those treaties possible. In 1836, you fall ill. The doctor prescribes rest, but you keep working. Letters pile upon your desk. The candles burn low, the air thick with wax and paper dust. You reread your father Sipt's will. The same clauses, the same warnings. Remain united. Trust no rumour. Marry within the circle. You whisper the words aloud, as though repeating them can hold the future in place. By the summer of 1836, you are gone. Your brothers gather once more, their carriages lining the street outside your London home. Inside, the rooms smell of lavender and smoke. The clocks have been stopped. James stands by the window, hat in hand. Salomon writes in a trembling script. The pillar has fallen, but the house must stand. When the mourners leave, James returns to Paris. He inherits not just your wealth, but your weight. The duty to keep the 5 arrows bound together. He builds his mansion on the Rue Lafite, its ballroom mirrored from floor to ceiling. He begins collecting art, buying paintings from old families ruined by revolutions. He funds new vineyards in Bordeaux. In 1853, his cousin Nathaniel, son of the late Nathan, buys a chateau near Pauillac and names it Mouton Rothschild. The name means the sheep, but the wine soon roars like a lion. It is spring in 1855. The Exposition Universelle opens in Paris. For the first time, France officially ranks its wines. The panel lists 4 great houses: Lafite, Latour, Margaux, and Haut-Brion. Mouton is placed 1 step below, as 12e Cru. James is furious, but Nathaniel only smiles. They will change it one day, he says. Nearly a century later, they will. But tonight, the candles burn low in the Paris salon. The air smells of tobacco and roses. The brothers' portraits hang along the walls. Mayer in his red shawl, Nathan with his hawk's nose, Salomon dignified, James serene. Music drifts from the piano, a nocturne by Chopin. For a moment, time folds back. You can almost hear the echo of that first counting room in Frankfurt, the sound of coins on a wooden table, the promise whispered over a red shield. Outside, rain falls softly against the glass. Inside, a dynasty dreams. And somewhere, deep beneath the Alps, the salt mines of Linz wait, patient, silent, preserving the beauty that greed once carried underground. You wake in Paris, 1857, beneath high ceilings painted with vines and myth. The light that slips through the curtains smells faintly of dust and lavender. From your balcony, the city stretches like a living organism, gas lamps flickering along the boulevards, carriages crossing in slow lines, iron balconies hung with drying linen. Downstairs, servants already carry in baskets of letters sealed in red wax. Some are from Vienna, others from London. All are written in the same precise script that has tied the family together for nearly a century. You are James Mayer de Rothschild, the youngest son of Mayer Amschel, and for the past 20 years the guardian of the Paris branch. At breakfast, the clatter of porcelain mingles with the sound of paper. You read reports of gold prices in Frankfurt, bond yields in London, and shipments of grain through the port of Marseille. Each number is another nerve in the great, invisible body that your family animates. One pulse missed, and everything falters. France, still licking the wounds of revolution, is now ruled by Napoleon III, the emperor who calls himself modern. The streets fill with engineers and speculators. They dream of iron railways, tunnels and machines that hiss like dragons. You understand him immediately. Empires are not built only with soldiers. They are built with credit. You take meetings in quiet rooms filled with oil paintings and ticking clocks. One afternoon, an official from the Ministry of Finance leans forward and whispers, "The Emperor wishes to build railways across the south. The nation needs partners with confidence, not fear." You nod slowly, sip your coffee, and reply, "Confidence is what we sell." Within a month, you have arranged the financing for a chain of lines connecting Paris to Lyon and Marseille. Engineers celebrate. Politicians boast of progress. But when the trains finally begin to move, it is your signature, hidden on the documents, that makes every wheel turn. That same year, a letter arrives from Bordeaux. Nathaniel, your cousin in London, has bought an estate called Chateau Braine-Mouton, renaming it Mouton Rothschild. His passion is wine, the slow art of fermentation, patience, and time. The letter smells faintly of oak and smoke. He writes, "Cousin James, each barrel teaches humility. Gold yields quickly, but wine demands seasons. Perhaps we should learn from it." You smile at the thought. In your salons, ministers talk of revolutions and credit. Nathaniel talks of tannins and rain, yet his work is no less deliberate. Every bottle that bears the family name carries the same signature of endurance. By 1868, you will buy your own vineyard, Chateau Lafite, the jewel of Bordeaux. It is not just an investment, but a declaration. Beauty, too, can be capital. When you visit the estate, the air smells of wet earth and crushed grapes. Workers move through the vines with stained hands. The sun glints off the river Gironde. A foreman hands you a glass. The taste is quiet. Iron, smoke, and fruit. You close your eyes and hear your father's voice again, telling you to keep the family one, to marry wisely, to trust only blood. The lesson remains. In your will, you repeat the same words. But the blood grows restless. By 1860, your nephews and cousins have become men of their own ambitions. The sons of the 5 brothers now run 5 distinct empires: British, French, Austrian, German, and Italian. At dinners, they still raise glasses together, but in their letters you sense the first hairline cracks. London prefers caution. Paris prefers risk. Vienna insists on etiquette. Naples on charm. Frankfurt, once the heart, now feels provincial. You write to your brothers, "Family is everything. It is the only fortune that does not lose value." Still, time pulls families apart as surely as gravity pulls stars. In 1867, Europe holds the Exposition Universelle once again. Visitors from every empire arrive to marvel at machines, telescopes, and telegraphs. The Rothschild Pavilion is understated. Polished wood, fine fabrics, the quiet scent of old coins. You watch crowds pass the displays of steel engines and gas lamps. The world, you realize, is accelerating. Then comes the year 1868, the year you die. You are 66. The doctors prescribe rest, but rest has never been part of your vocabulary. You lie in bed beneath silk sheets, staring at the ceiling fresco of clouds and cherubs, and think of the first shop in Frankfurt, the smell of coin metal, the sound of shutters closing over the ghetto at night. The journey from that narrow street to this Parisian mansion feels unreal, like a story someone else told you. When the end comes, the family gathers in silence. Outside, carriages line the Rue Lafite. Inside, candles burn low. A priest reads quietly in Latin, though few listen. The true prayers are whispered in German, French, and English all at once. After the funeral, the house stands empty. The portraits of Mayer and Gutelle hang above the marble staircase. Their painted eyes watch another century begin. The family's unity dissolves with the smoke of the candles. No single heir can hold all the threads. London, Paris, Vienna, and Naples each go their own way, still bound by trade but no longer by trust. The 5 arrows once drawn together now point in different directions. It is 1875, and the century seems to have changed its rhythm. Steamships roar across the oceans, telegraph wires hum across continents. For the first time, the world feels small. In England, the government faces an unexpected opportunity. The Khedive of Egypt, burdened by debt, offers to sell his country's shares in the Suez Canal Company, 44% of it, the key to global trade between Europe and Asia. The sum is enormous, £4 million due immediately. At 10 Downing Street, Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli paces. The Treasury has no cash. Parliament would never approve a loan in time. The decision must be made in hours. So Disraeli sends a message, not to the Bank of England, but to the House of Rothschild. In a quiet office on New Court, a messenger delivers the request. The air smells of ink and damp wool. Within an hour, telegrams spark across Europe. By nightfall, the money is ready. The next morning, Britain owns the canal. When newspapers report the news, one headline reads, "The canal belongs to England, thanks to Rothschild." Another writes with alarm, "Does England now owe her empire to a single family?" The family ignores the noise. They have heard such whispers for 100 years. Far from London, in the vineyards of Bordeaux, the harvest begins. Barrels creak under their own weight. Nathaniel Sepp's son, Baron Nathaniel II, walks between rows of vines, his boots sinking in wet soil. He carries a telegram from Paris. "Uncle James dead. Lafite, now ours." He folds it quietly, tucks it into his pocket, and looks toward the horizon where the ocean meets the river. The sun is setting, the sky the colour of old wine. Somewhere deep in the cellar, a worker hammers a cork into place. The sound echoes like a heartbeat through stone walls. The Belle Époque dawns, a world of electric light and orchestras, of cafes filled with smoke and laughter. In London and Paris, the name Rothschild means elegance as much as money. They sponsor hospitals, art schools, botanical gardens. Their carriages appear at charity balls and operas. Their wines pour at royal banquets. And yet the shadow of envy never leaves. Newspapers speculate endlessly on the size of their fortune. Some say £50 million, others 5 times more. Cartoonists draw them as spiders weaving webs across maps. The same old stories return, that they fund both sides of wars, that they whisper in the ears of kings. None of it is proven, but repetition gives rumour the texture of fact. Still, life inside the mansions continues with measured grace. In Waddesdon Manor, the English cousin, Baron Ferdinand de Rothschild, builds a home that looks like a Laura chateau transplanted to the green hills of Buckinghamshire. When it opens in 1889, guests marvel at the electric chandeliers and hidden elevators, luxuries unheard of outside royal palaces. Queen Victoria visits and spends 10 minutes switching the lights on and off, delighted by the miracle of electricity. Dinner that night is legendary. The dessert, a miniature sugar replica of the manor itself, gleams under the new bulbs like a crystal dream. Late that evening, as the guests drift away, Ferdinand walks alone through the corridors. The house is silent except for the ticking of clocks and the distant rustle of trees. He stops before a portrait of his ancestor Nathan, painted long ago in London. For a moment the painted eyes seem alive. Watching him through centuries of glass and dust, he whispers, "We built so much to be safe from time, and yet time always finds a way in." Outside, The wind moves through the gardens carrying the scent of roses and rain. The night feels endless, soft and full of ghosts. If you enjoy these journeys, a like and a subscription mean more than you think. They directly keep this channel alive. You wake to the scent of iron and paper. It is 1890, and London feels like the centre of every current running through the world. Telegraph poles line the streets like skeletal trees. Steam whistles echo across the Thames. The city is an orchestra of invention. Factories, locomotives, bankers and beggars, all playing the same restless rhythm. You are Ferdinand de Rothschild, baron, collector, builder of Waddesdon, heir to stories carved into portraits and contracts. You inherited not just wealth, but an empire of expectation. When you walk through your house, you sometimes feel as if every door opens into another century. At breakfast, you unfold the Times. The headlines speak of colonies, strikes, and the wild hunger for gold in Africa. Beneath the ink, the century hums with danger. Britain's empire stretches across the seas, but its pride rests on fragile credit. And in those invisible corridors of debt and promise, your family's name is written still. In your study, the air smells of polish and candle smoke. Letters arrive from Vienna and Paris, bearing the family seal. The tone has changed, fewer endearments, more figures. The unity that once made the house unbreakable now feels like habit more than truth, yet the network still works. Each cousin keeps a post in the great machine of finance. The London house under Lord Nathaniel, the French house under Alphonse, the Austrian under Albert, and the newly founded Swiss branch under Edmund, a restless young man with sharp eyes and quiet conviction. You read a letter from him dated 1887, stamped Geneva. Cousin Ferdinand, the Alps are calm, and the clients discreet. I believe Switzerland will be our future. Neutral, private, eternal. What we began in Frankfurt must survive all empires, even England sips. You smile. He may be right. The world has grown too noisy for discretion. The industrial age is also the age of nerves. Telegraph wires carry gossip faster than ships once carried gold. You still remember the feel of sealed letters, the softness of wax under your thumb. Now news comes in electric pulses, impossible to contain. A whisper in the markets of Paris reaches New York within hours. Fortunes rise and fall before the ink of yesterday's contract is dry. The Rothschild network, once built on patience and secrecy, must adapt. The family builds partnerships with new firms, Baring Brothers, J.P. Morgan, Lazard Frères. Rivals once despised become collaborators in survival. In 1893, the panic in the United States rattles the world. Gold drains from the US Treasury. Panic spreads across the Atlantic. An urgent cable arrives from Washington. Government reserves nearly exhausted. Can your London and Paris houses assist? By dawn, telegrams race through 3 capitals. The Rothschilds and Morgans jointly arrange a shipment of £3 million in gold, stabilizing the dollar and rescuing the American government from default. Newspapers hail the rescue as a miracle of private finance. The New York Sun writes, 2 houses have done what no Congress could. You pour yourself a glass of brandy and read the article twice. A smile flickers and fades. The world now relies on bankers, as once it relied on kings. But you know how swiftly gratitude curdles into resentment. That same decade, science and art mingle with your name once again. The vineyards in Bordeaux continue to thrive. Bottles of Chateau Lafite and Mouton Rothschild now sell for small fortunes at court dinners. In Paris, Alphonse de Rothschild sponsors the purchase of paintings for the Louvre. He hosts soirées where artists argue beneath chandelier, Delacour, Degas, Whistler. The walls shimmer with gold and smoke. But outside those salons, the century grows darker. Industrial wealth feeds industrial misery. In Russia, the Tsar's ministers whisper about socialism in Germany. New newspapers speak of international conspiracies. You recognize the old poison returning under new names. The same myths that haunted your grandfather's time, the idea of invisible hands controlling nations, begin to resurface, uglier than before. In 1898, Ferdinand walks alone through Waddesdon's Great Hall. His collection has reached 300 pieces: miniatures, armor, crystal, tapestries, reliquaries. He runs a finger over the edge of a silver chalice and feels the chill of metal. Beauty, too, can become a burden. He thinks of his father's voice: collect not for vanity but for memory. A few months later, he dies suddenly at 59. The manor passes to his sister, who donates his treasures to the British Museum. The last note he writes before his death reads simply: "To hold the past is not to own it." The torch passes to Edmund de Rothschild, the quiet banker in Switzerland. It is 1899, and the new century looms like a train whistle in the distance. Edmund reads about Theodor Herzl and the First Zionist Congress in Basel. The idea of a Jewish homeland, once a dream whispered in exile, now takes shape on paper. Unlike his forebears, Edmund acts not through loans but through land. He buys acres of soil in Palestine, near Haifa and Rishon LeZion. He funds wells, roads, and vineyards. The settlers call him Hanadiv Hayadu, the known benefactor. In his letters to Paris he writes, "The earth is poor and rocky, but hope grows well here. I believe that one day our people will no longer measure themselves by what they lend, but by what they plant." His cousins smile politely and call it philanthropy. He calls it redemption. The 20th century arrives like a thunderclap. Factories roar. Airships glide over Paris. The first automobiles rattle down the Champs-Élysées. Yet beneath the surface, cracks spread through the European order. Nations compete for colonies, armies swell, and newspapers trade in fear. In the summer of 1905, revolution rocks the Russian Empire. Workers strike, soldiers mutiny, pogroms sweep through the cities. The oil fields of Baku, once a pillar of the Rothschild business, burn under a red sky. Tankers that once carried millions of gallons through the Suez Canal now lie idle. In a boardroom in Paris, Alphonse's son Edouard studies the figures and sighs. Losses climb, debts multiply. The family sells its Russian interests to Royal Dutch Shell, bowing to the new giants of oil. You picture the fires of Baku from thousands of miles away, black smoke twisting into the Caucasus sky, the smell of tar and salt. The empire of money, born in candlelight, now burns in its own reflection. In England, Walter de Rothschild, the naturalist nephew of Ferdinand, turns from finance to feathers. He opens a zoological museum at Tring in 1892, filled with butterflies, fossils, and birds from every corner of the earth. He walks through the aisles in a tweed coat, followed by kangaroos and zebras he keeps as pets. Children of the village press their noses to the glass, staring in awe. Even in eccentricity, the family continues its pattern, turning curiosity into legacy. By 1901, the original Frankfurt branch closes. No male heirs remain. The old house with the red shield finally darkens. The circle begun in the ghetto ends, not with tragedy but with exhaustion. The ledgers are sealed, the furniture covered in linen. A clerk locks the door and walks away. That night, rain falls on the empty street. Somewhere nearby, a street violinist plays a tune older than memory. In 1912, Edmund's vineyards in Palestine yield their first bottles. He sits on a veranda near Caesarea, the Mediterranean wind rustling the olive trees. The glass in his hand reflects the dusk, amber and soft. His wife reads the news aloud. Rumours of war in the Balkans, alliances tightening, empires preparing their weapons. Edmund sighs. He has seen this pattern before. The telegrams from Europe grow sharper, more urgent. Mobilization possible. Markets volatile. Prepare liquidity. And then, June 1914, Sarajevo. The sound of a pistol shot ricochets across the century. When war begins, the Rothschilds once again find themselves on every side of the lines, British, French, German, Austrian, each branch loyal to its homeland. Bonds that once tied them in profit now divide them in patriotism. In London, Lord Nathaniel funds the British war effort. In Vienna, Albert aids the Austro-Hungarian treasury. In Paris, Edouard supports the French government. Brothers in ancestry, adversaries in duty. You imagine the salt mines again, waiting in their cold darkness, remembering the paintings taken from Vienna 70 years later. History always circles back. In 1917, when the guns finally fall silent, Europe is unrecognizable. Empires shattered, currencies bleeding value, millions dead, and through it all, the old red shield still glows faintly above doorways in London and Paris. The family has lost fortunes, but not their instinct. Within a decade, they will rebuild. Yet something essential has changed. The age of dynasties is fading. The world now belongs to corporations, to systems too large for any family to hold. Still, the legend endures, whispered in markets, printed in pamphlets, half believed, half feared. The idea that somewhere, in a quiet room of polished wood and ticking clocks, a family still weighs the balance of the world. You close your eyes and hear the steady drip of rain against the window pane. The air smells of paper, wine, and iron. History exhales around you, patient as ever. You wake to the quiet hum of Paris. 1925. The war has ended, but its echo lingers like smoke in every corner of Europe. The boulevards have changed faces. Veterans without legs sell newspapers. Children chase the smell of bread instead of the sound of parades. And on the walls of cafes, the new posters promise modern life. You are Edouard de Rothschild, son of Alphonse, guardian of the Paris house, the third generation since Mayer Amschel. The ledgers before you tell a strange story, lines of profit rising again, and then sharp cliffs of loss. France rebuilds, currencies collapse, gold flows restlessly from one continent to another. You run your fingers down the columns of figures, and feel the pulse of a world that no longer believes in permanence. Your office smells of leather and tobacco. Outside, car horns bleat like impatient animals. The family's London cousins, led by Lionel de Rothschild, write in cautious optimism. The Swiss house, founded by Edmund, thrives quietly among the clean mountains, untouched by politics. But in Germany, where the old Frankfurt branch once stood, a new kind of anger grows. Pamphlets spread through beer halls, blaming bankers, foreigners, and ghosts. They use an old word, Rothschild, like a spell. You light another cigarette. Smoke curls above the documents. You have seen hatred come and go, and you tell yourself it cannot return to power again. Across the sea, in America, the stock market roars. The 1920s become a carnival of speculation. New automobiles, new radios, new dreams. You visit New York in 1928, staying at the Plaza Hotel. From your suite you can see Wall Street like a canyon of glass. Every office burns with electric light. The air smells of heat and paper. At a dinner hosted by J.P. Morgan SIP successors, you listen to men toast the endless future. One of them laughs and says, "Gentlemen, there will be no more crises. We have conquered risk itself." You smile politely, but inside you know better. Money, like tide water, always returns to the sea. A year later, it happens. October 1929, Black Tuesday. The world's paper towers collapse. You read the telegrams in disbelief. 30% of value gone in a week. Entire fortunes erased. You remember your grandfather's letters still preserved in the family archive. Never be the first to panic. And you don't. The Rothschild houses endure, scarred but standing. They hold gold, not promises. Yet something deeper breaks. The world's faith in certainty. That old invisible foundation is gone. The 1930s arrive like a long grey winter. You walk the banks of the Seine, feeling the weight of the fog. The cafes are full again, but the laughter sounds forced. Across the river, ministries print money to pay for hope. In Germany, a small man with a mustache speaks in halls filled with torches. Each word he utters feels like a match struck inside a powder room. When he speaks of conspiracies, he uses your family's name, not as history but as weapon. You receive letters from Vienna, trembling with fear. The Austrian branch, led by Louis von Rothschild, still runs its affairs from a white palace on the Ringstrasse. But by 1938, after Hitler's troops cross the border, everything changes in a single night. The city wakes under new flags. At dawn, German soldiers climb the marble stairs of Louis VII's home. He meets them at breakfast, calm, still wearing his silk dressing gown. The officer salutes stiffly and says, "Herr Rothschild, by order of the Reich, your properties are seized." Louis cuts another slice of pastry, lifts his coffee, and says, "At least allow me to finish my dessert." It's a small legend, one of those gestures history preserves because it understands defiance better than fear. But defiance has its price. He is arrested hours later. They demand an impossible ransom for his release, $21 million, the largest individual payment ever recorded. Even for the Rothschilds, the sum is staggering. Months pass as cousins in London and Paris negotiate. At last, the gold transfers and Louis is freed, leaving behind his country, his libraries, his art. He boards a train to Switzerland with one suitcase and a cane. Behind him, the family's palaces are stripped bare. In Vienna, 3,444 objects, paintings, sculptures, jewelry, are catalogued by Nazi officials. The most precious are reserved for Hitler's planned Führer Museum in Linz. Others are scattered across Europe. By 1944, as the Allies advance, the crates of stolen art are hidden deep inside salt mines near Salzburg. Paintings sleep beside gold bars and violins, waiting in the dark. The war devours everything else. You are old now, Edouard, but your memory is sharp. You flee to New York with your family before the German invasion of France in 1940. The Atlantic crossing is slow and silent. Nights smell of metal and diesel. On deck, you stare at the black horizon and think of your ancestors. Of Mayer in the ghetto, of Nathan in foggy London. Of James buying Lafite when the world was young. In those weeks, you stop feeling rich. You feel small, carried by history like a coin rolling down an endless stair. Back in Europe, Paris falls. The family's French estates are seized. Lafite's vineyards are taken over by German administrators. Cellars that once smelled of oak and wine now reek of gasoline and fear. And yet, through the network of friends and exiles, through Swiss vaults and coded accounts, the name survives. You receive cables in New York, short and deliberate. Hold firm, the line continues. When the war finally ends in 1945, you return to Europe. The city has changed. Grey, hollow, exhausted. The boulevards you once knew gleam with broken glass. Allied soldiers patrol the bridges. Markets trade in cigarettes instead of francs. You walk through the Louvre, half expecting to see blank spaces on the walls where your family's paintings once hung, but some have returned. Rembrandt, Vermeer, Goya. The museum's guide tells you they were found in the salt mines near Salzburg. You picture them there, asleep under rock and silence, preserved by accident, like memory itself. In Switzerland, Edmund's descendants rebuild quietly. Their bank grows discreet and slow, serving industrialists and philanthropists. They move through the post-war years, like divers through deep water, silent, efficient, unseen. In France, Edouard's heirs reclaim Lafite and reopen its vineyards. The first post-war vintage, 1945, is legendary. Dark, concentrated, touched by smoke and history. On the label, a small V appears, V for victory. The bottle becomes a symbol of survival, of persistence, of beauty made from ruin. Yet the shadow lingers. In every decade that follows, the myths resurface like weeds. The same pamphlets, now printed in glossy ink, The same rumors that kings once whispered, that there is a hand behind governments, that money bends nations, that one family moves the levers of fate. You could laugh, but laughter feels heavy. You know the truth. The world has outgrown dynasties. Power no longer wears a surname. It hides in systems, markets, and codes. Still, on quiet nights, when you visit the archives in London or the cellars of Lafite, you feel the pulse of the old network. The papers still whisper. The coins still shine faintly in the dark. It is 1953 now. The Paris house, once the grandest of them all, is nationalized by the socialist government of François Mitterrand. The clerks remove the brass plates from the doors. The family seals are taken down. The desks emptied. You watch from the window as the sign is carried away. For a moment the air smells like Frankfurt again, like candle wax, coin dust, and closing shutters. But history, you think, always loops back to its beginning. A year later, in Switzerland, Edmund's son founds a new private bank, Edmund de Rothschild Group, modest, conservative, immune to noise. Across the Channel, the British branch continues as N.M. Rothschild and Sons, advising governments, guiding currencies, yet speaking little. 3 houses remain, 3 arrows from the fist, the rest scattered but unbroken. One afternoon in 1957, you walk through the vineyards at Lafite. The air smells of honey and stone. The workers are singing in Occitan, the same song their fathers sang before the wars. You run your hand along the rough bark of a vine and realize that this, not gold, not art, not rumor, is what endures. The land doesn't care for legends. It only remembers seasons. You close your eyes and hear the distant hum of a tractor, the buzz of a bee, the steady beating of your own pulse. The world is quieter now, but beneath the silence you sense the same rhythm that began in Frankfurt centuries ago, counting, weighing, waiting. And somewhere beneath Austria, in a mine long since sealed, the dust of old paintings still rests on wooden crates. On one of them, faint letters in German spell the same name that has crossed every empire, the Red Shield. You wake to the sound of wind combing through the vines. It is 1960, and dawn spills across the fields of Bordeaux like gold poured from a bottle. The war is 15 years behind you, but its scent still lingers in the cellars, a trace of damp stone, ash, and salt. The workers arrive early, their boots crunching over frost, their breath hanging like smoke. You watch from the veranda of Chateau Lafite Rothschild, the air heavy with the smell of oak and earth. In the courtyard below, barrels are rolled toward the presses. Birds wheel over the trees. You stand beside your nephew Guy de Rothschild, tall, lean, and restless, the heir to the Paris house. He is a man shaped by 2 wars and too much silence. France has forgotten what dignity means. He says quietly, "It's time to remind her." He takes over the French branch in 1957, determined to restore the family's reputation and relevance. For years, the name Rothschild has been both myth and ghost, whispered by conspiracy theorists, invoked by financiers, forgotten by the young. Guy wants to make it human again. You follow him to Paris, where the city once more vibrates with ambition. Post-war reconstruction gives way to prosperity. The Trente Glorieuses, 30 golden years of industry and optimism. Trains thunder through new tunnels, cars fill the boulevards, the skyline bristles with cranes. Guy moves through this world like a conductor. His new office at Der Rothschild Frere smells of ink, paper, and faint cologne. The walls display not paintings of ancestors, but blueprints, factories, pipelines, bridges. His handwriting is precise, almost impatient. He invests in the steelworks of Lorraine, in aviation, in chemical industries. A banker who serves only kings will die with them, he tells his son David, born in 1942. But a banker who serves progress will live forever. At night, he entertains politicians and artists in salons filled with jazz and cigarette smoke. Among his guests are Charles de Gaulle's ministers, diplomats, even philosophers from the Sorbonne. Conversations drift between the future of Europe and the taste of the latest vintage. In this new century, influence comes not from secrecy, but from presence. Still, the old world occasionally knocks on the door. In 1963, Guy visits Waddesdon Manor, now a museum under the National Trust but still cared for by the English cousins. The hall smells of wax and rain-soaked wool. The portraits of the founders hang in silence. Nathan, James, Salomon, Karl, Amschel, the 5 arrows of the emblem. Dust dances in the sunlight. He pauses before the painting of Mayer Amschel, the patriarch from Frankfurt. "We built a network when others built walls," Guy murmurs. "Now the walls have fallen, but the network must learn to breathe again." The guide clears her throat softly. "Visitors say these rooms feel alive," she whispers. He smiles. "They should. Gold has memory." By the mid-1960s, the Rothschilds are back at the centre of finance. The London house, NEM Rothschild and Sons, thrives under Sir Evelyn de Rothschild, advising governments on currencies and metals. They help stabilise the pound sterling, manage North Sea oil, and quietly shape the post-war economic order. In Geneva, Edmund de Rothschild expands his Swiss bank, focusing on private investment, philanthropy, and art. He finances scientific research, mountain infrastructure, and even cultural projects in Israel. Each branch grows along its own line but still answers to the old code: integrity, discretion, and endurance. Letters pass between them, just as they did a century ago. The handwriting is new, the tone unchanged. Family first. Never forget the shield. But the century doesn't stay still. In 1968, Paris erupts again. Barricades, cobblestones, protests. Students shout about freedom. Workers strike. The smell of tear gas fills the boulevards. The same city that once hailed kings now chants against all authority, including yours. Bankers are relics. Someone paints on a wall near your office. Guy drives through the chaos, windows rolled down. He watches the crowds and sighs. Every age thinks it has invented rebellion. He says, "Ours just wears better shoes." He refuses to hide. Instead, he opens scholarships for students, funds theatres, supports filmmakers. He hosts debates on capitalism and ethics. "We cannot defend the past," he tells his wife Marie-Helene. "We must translate it." By the 1970s, the strategy works. The family regains a quiet respect, not as untouchable barons, but as patient architects of recovery. Then, in 1973, irony strikes again. The Paris house, once nationalized in the early 1950s, faces another political storm. Socialist pressures rise, taxation tightens, industries shift. To survive, Guy establishes Bank Rothschild as a modern institution under new law, blending tradition with reform. The same year, on the other side of the Atlantic, the oil crisis sends shockwaves through global markets. Petrol prices quadruple, currencies tremble, yet the Rothschild houses remain steady. Their balance sheets, cautious and heavy with real assets, act as ballast in the storm. Clients return, governments listen. The red shield, faded by rumour, gleams once more. Still, every empire tests its foundations. In 1981, the French Socialist Party, led by François Mitterrand, sweeps to power. Within a year, the new government nationalizes Banque Rothschild. Again, you sit beside Guy in the dim office as officials read the decree. Outside, the streets echo with chants about equality and change. The furniture smells of old polish and tension. So he says quietly, "We are history once more." But he doesn't break. The following year, he and his son David register a new entity under Swiss jurisdiction, Rothschild and C. Banque, modest at first, operating from a small office with 2 desks and 3 telephones. "We'll start the way our ancestor did," Guy tells him, "from one room and an idea." And just like that, the cycle turns again. In 1988, Guy retires, leaving the reins to David. The world has changed beyond recognition. Computers, satellites, credit cards, global markets that move faster than breath. The smell of ink and wax is replaced by the hum of electronics. Yet the family's rhythm remains. Patience, precision, discretion. David builds quietly, rebuilding relationships with clients, governments, and investors. By 1993, the French branch regains its full license. The Red Shield returns to the glass doors on Rue Lafite, the same street where James once wrote his first contracts a century and a half earlier. Meanwhile, in Switzerland, Edmund's heirs turn toward the future. They open new funds for environmental investment, renewable energy, and space technology. His granddaughter, Ariane de Rothschild, studies finance and later becomes a leading figure in the Swiss group, steering it towards sustainability. In her speeches, she says, "Our family's greatest inheritance is adaptability." Her words sound modern, but they echo Mayer's first lesson in Frankfurt: survive by serving what others need most. By the late 1990s, globalization reshapes everything. Borders blur, money moves at light speed. Even secrecy changes, meaning the Rothschilds no longer hide behind marble walls. They speak at conferences, publish reports, invest in the open, and yet the quiet remains their signature. At an anniversary dinner in London, 1998, representatives from all branches gather for the first time in generations. The hall is warm with laughter and candlelight. Sir Evelyn raises his glass. "Our ancestors dealt in gold," he says. "We deal in information, but the principle is the same. Trust must weigh more than metal." For a moment, silence fills the room. The younger cousins, dressed in modern suits, glance at the portraits lining the walls. Men and women who lived through wars, revolutions, accusations, and exiles. The candles flicker against their painted faces. You feel the weight of centuries settle gently, not as burden but as breath. Outside, rain begins to fall over the Thames. The city glows, bridges strung with light, towers blinking like distant fires. You walk to the window, hearing the rain tick against the glass, the same rhythm that once echoed on the cobblestones of Frankfurt. 250 years have passed since a boy learned to test coins by sound. Empires have risen and collapsed, currencies born and buried, yet the Red Shield still hangs, smaller now, perhaps humbler, but alive. You whisper to yourself, history doesn't belong to those who win, it belongs to those who endure. And in the reflection of the glass, you see them all, Mayer with his candle, Nathan with his letters, James among his paintings, Edmund among his vines, Guy among his papers. The faces fade into one another until only the faint outline of a red shield remains, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. The night outside deepens. A car passes, its headlights tracing the word Rothschild in pale gold across the wall. The light fades, but the name stays, quiet as ever. You wake in London, 2003, to the faint hum of servers and the soft click of a coffee machine that brews itself. The air smells of rain and electricity. Outside your window, the glass towers of the city catch the early light like blades. Somewhere below, buses sigh through puddles, and the streets where horses once clattered now pulse with invisible data. The world has turned transparent and unreadable all at once. The Rothschilds, those merchants of patience, stand at the edge of another transformation. The Red Shield still gleams above the doors of N.M. Rothschild and Sons, but the ink has gone digital, the ledgers replaced by glowing screens. The sound of quills scratching on parchment is gone, replaced by the whisper of keyboards. You are David de Rothschild, born in 1942, now head of the French house, calm-eyed and deliberate. You sit in a conference room that smells faintly of paper and machine oil, surrounded by young analysts who speak a new language: derivatives, leverage, liquidity spreads. They wear suits like armor, faces bright with caffeine and ambition. You watch them and wonder if they can still hear the heartbeat beneath the numbers. On the wall hangs a reproduction of Mayer Amschel Rothschild's portrait. Dark coat, steady gaze, hand resting on a ledger. The ancestor seems to look at the glowing screens with a kind of amused confusion. You whisper, "We traded letters for pixels, but the trust is the same." The meeting begins. A client from Singapore appears on the screen, his image crisp and delayed by a fraction of a second. Across continents, deals are struck without paper, without scent, without handshakes. Yet the rhythm feels familiar. Voices weighed, silences measured. You think of Nathan writing from London in 1814, his pen trembling over a promise that would change empires. The tools evolve. The instinct does not. The firm is leaner now, focused on advisory rather than ownership. No vast fortunes hidden in vaults. No empires of oil or railroads. Only intelligence, timing, and reputation. But reputation, in this age, is more fragile than gold ever was. A rumour can circle the globe before your coffee cools. Outside, London swells with noise. Skyscrapers rise where bomb craters once were. Traders shout. Phones vibrate. Markets swing like fever. The air tastes of metal and rain. You step outside for a moment and let it wash over you. Every building here, every financial district from New York to Hong Kong, owes something to the lineage that began in a Frankfurt ghetto 2.5 centuries ago. Across the channel, the Swiss branch, now the Edmond de Rothschild Group, grows into its own quiet empire. It manages portfolios, builds green infrastructure, funds hospitals and schools. Baron Benjamin de Rothschild, Edmond's grandson, runs it from Geneva, his office lined with alpine photographs and models of sailboats. His wife, Ariane, joins him in reshaping the business for the 21st century. She speaks 5 languages, prefers results to ceremony, and calls philanthropy the most useful form of strategy. Under their direction, the group turns towards sustainability before the word becomes fashionable. Forest restoration, renewable energy, microfinance, new currencies of conscience. We no longer build castles. Ariane tells a journalist, "We build resilience." When she visits the vineyards at Chateau Clark, she walks among the rows of vines, touching the leaves like fragile pages. "The soil remembers more than we do," she says. "It never forgets who tended it." Meanwhile, in London, Sir Evelyn de Rothschild retires, and a new generation takes the helm. His successor at Rothschild & Co., the restructured global holding, focuses on advisory services, wealth management and mergers. The bank's motto is discreet but clear: harmony, integrity, industry. The same Latin words carved into the family crest in 1822 now glow from screensavers and email signatures. Each quarter the board meets in a room overlooking the Thames. The minutes are digital, but the traditions endure. There is always a pause before decisions, a silence long enough to hear the tick of the antique clock brought from Frankfurt a century ago. When someone breaks it, their voice always sounds softer than they intended. The new millennium moves quickly. 2008. The global financial crisis. You remember the headlines like old friends, Lehman collapses, markets freeze, panic spreads. The phone in your office rings without stopping. Clients beg for stability, for guidance, for reassurance that the earth will not split. You remember your ancestor Nathan Turp's phrase, "Be bold when others tremble." You speak calmly, invest conservatively, and wait. When the storm passes, your houses stand, smaller than before but steady, because you have learned over centuries that collapse is only fatal to those who forget that money, like faith, must rest on patience. In the aftermath, governments rediscover humility. Politicians who once mocked bankers now whisper for advice. Reporters write about the enduring prudence of the Rothschild model, words that would have made Mayer smile. The cycle repeats: suspicion, disaster, reliance, as if the world again and again forgets what stability looks like until it needs it. You travel often now. New York, Tel Aviv, Hong Kong, the same family name opens every door, but in softer tones. Gone are the marble halls and gold-trimmed carriages. Now it's glass lobbies, biometric scanners, silence, coffee served in paper cups. During flights, you read letters from the archive, centuries of ink on paper preserved in the family vault. Some are still stained with candle soot and wax. Mayer's cramped German script, Nathan's impatient English, James's elegant French. Each line reminds you that before there was wealth, there was handwriting. Before there was power, there was trust written in ink. One evening, on a flight over the Alps, you find a letter from Edmund de Rothschild, dated 1912. Our duty is to plant trees under whose shade we will never sit. You stare out the window at the dark ridges below and whisper, "We sere still planting." In Geneva, Ariane's Foundation launches an initiative for biodiversity. In Paris, David's sons merge the family's British and French arms again after nearly 2 centuries of separation. The press calls it the reunion of the arrows. They laugh at the metaphor, but it fits. In 2012, the new unified group, simply called Rothschild & Co., adopts a single global symbol, 5 arrows bound together, modernized in clean lines of silver and red. For the first time since the 1800s, the European branches operate as one. At the celebration dinner, held in a restored Paris townhouse, candles flicker under vaulted ceilings. The room smells of citrus and oak. A small orchestra plays softly in the corner. You raise your glass and think of the old motto, Concordia Integritas Industria. The words no longer mean conquest. They mean endurance. Outside, the world hums at terrifying speed. Algorithms trade faster than thought. Currencies exist only as light. Billionaires rise and vanish like sparks. The red shield, once a symbol of control, now feels like an anchor in a sea of noise. When asked by a journalist what defines the family sep's longevity, you answer, memory. He smiles politely, expecting a sound bite. You continue. We remember what others forget. That value comes from time, not velocity. He writes that down as if it's a quote, but for you it's more of a prayer. By 2020, the world changes again. The pandemic silences cities, empty airports, quiet streets, headlines that look like warnings from another age. Markets tremble, fear spreads faster than infection, but for those who have studied centuries of crisis, it feels strangely familiar. You spend those months working from a small room lined with books. The smell of paper comforts you more than antiseptic wipes or digital screens. Through video calls, you see young analysts, faces pale with worry, asking what to do. You tell them, hold the line, crises end, memory endures. When the worst passes, you visit Lafite once more. The vineyards have grown even quieter. The workers masked but steady. The air is heavy with spring. You walk between the rows, tracing your hand along the vines. Their roots, deep and old, survive droughts, wars, revolutions. You kneel, press your palm to the earth, and whisper, "This is the real inheritance." That evening, you stand in the cellar. Bottles rest in perfect order, each a small archive of years. You brush dust from one label, 1945, the Victory Vintage. Another reads 1973, the year of rebirth. Another, 2020, still unsealed. You smile. The family has become what time demanded. Less empire, more echo, not rulers of wealth, but curators of continuity. When you return to your study in London, you find a letter waiting, sent from a distant cousin in New York. It contains only one sentence. We remain the guardians of memory. You light a candle, anachronistic, unnecessary, and set it beside your computer. The glow reflects on the screen, warm and soft, turning glass into something almost human. You think of the warehouses in Linz, the salt mines in Austria, the ghetto in Frankfurt, the counting house in London, the vineyards, the storms, the endless letters. Then you close your eyes. In the silence, you hear the faint scratch of a quill, the echo of a coin, the steady heartbeat of centuries counting softly beneath your breath. If you enjoy these journeys, a like and a subscription mean more than you think. They directly keep this channel alive. And I'd love to hear from you too. Where are you listening from? And what time is it right now? You wake to the sound of light rain over London. It is 2012, and the city glows like wet steel from the window of the old headquarters on St. Selwyn's Lane, the same narrow street where Nathan Mayer Rothschild once opened his counting house in 1809. You can see the Thames, grey and calm, running like a vein through the heart of the financial world. You are David de Rothschild, 70 years old, chairman of the newly united Rothschild & Co., a name reborn after nearly 2 centuries of division. The conference room smells of polished oak and coffee. On the wall hangs a single emblem, a fist clutching 5 silver arrows, updated for the digital age but unmistakably the same design first granted by Emperor Francis I of Austria in 1822. The room fills with quiet voices, partners from Paris, London and Zurich. For the first time since the brothers of Mayer Amschel scattered across Europe, the family's principal houses are whole again. The merger of N.M. Rothschild and Sons UK and Rothschild and Sear Bank France is complete. Across the table, your cousin Alexandra de Rothschild, 32, reviews the agenda. 2 centuries apart, you say softly, and it still begins in this room. The timeline behind you is long and real. 1981, the French socialist government nationalized the Paris Bank. 1986, Guy de Rothschild refounded it as Rothschild & Associés Banque. 1991, he retired, passing control to you. 2003, the firm became Rothschild & C Bank, strong enough to stand beside London again. And now, in 2012, the houses are one under a single banner, Rothschild & Company. The documents before you outline the structure of a modern empire. 2,800 employees, offices in 40 countries, advising governments on sovereign debt, guiding mergers from Rio de Janeiro to Hong Kong, investing in renewable energy, infrastructure and technology. The business has changed beyond recognition since Nathan's day, but when you read the mission statement, independent advice built on trust and discretion, it feels like something written in candlelight 200 years earlier. Outside, the bells of St. Paul's Cathedral toll noon. The sound rolls through the drizzle. You think of another crisis, 2008, only 4 years ago, when the world's banks trembled. You remember sitting in the same office, the air thick with fear and phone calls. Governments begged for liquidity. Traders shouted across the city. But your firm stayed calm. The Rothschild model, still rooted in partnership capital instead of speculative leverage, endured. While giants like Lehman collapsed, you advised states on how to stabilize, restructure and rebuild. In 2009, Britain's Treasury called your office for counsel on public debt management. In 2010, France did the same. You didn't gamble, you guided. That difference saved you. Your father once told you, "We are not gamblers. We are translators of risk." Now you understand what he meant. In the same years, another branch of the family grew quietly across the Alps. In Geneva, Baron Edmund de Rothschild, grandson of the original Edmund, had founded a private Swiss bank in 1953. By the early 2000s, it had become a global institution, managing portfolios across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. His son Benjamin, and Benjamin's wife Ariane, expanded it into the Edmund de Rothschild Group, investing in green energy, biotech, and social entrepreneurship. You meet Ariane often, in Paris, in Geneva, sometimes at Lafite during the harvest. She speaks in measured tones, fluent in both finance and empathy. Our grandfather Edmund planted vines in Palestine when others planted borders. She once said, "We should keep planting, just in other soil." In Bordeaux, the family's vineyards still breathe like living archives. At Chateau Lafite Rothschild, the 2009 vintage wins near-perfect scores from every critic. Its sister estate, Mouton Rothschild, continues the tradition begun in 1945, commissioning a new artist each year to design its label. Dali, Picasso, Chagall, Bacon, Miro. The wines that once travelled only to royal courts now sell at global auctions, their bottles symbols of patience turned to art. During a visit in 2015, you stand beneath the vines at dusk. The air smells of cedar and salt from the Atlantic wind. Workers speak softly in Gascon, their movements rhythmic, ancient. You remember James's words from 1838, "No price is too high for a masterpiece." Here the masterpiece is time itself. That same year, the firm advises Portugal, Greece and Ireland through the European debt crisis. You fly constantly. Lisbon, Brussels, Berlin. Always the same ritual. Marble lobbies, sealed folders, quiet rooms where nations confess their numbers. You listen, simplify, propose. One morning in Brussels, a minister tells you, "The world trusts you because you've seen it all." You smile and think, not all, just enough to know that it repeats. When David Cameron calls for economic consultation before the Brexit referendum of 2016, your London office provides analysis of capital risk. You walk him through scenarios, graphs and probabilities. You cannot vote with emotion, you tell him. He nods, distracted. History, as always, will ignore advice. After the vote, markets shudder again, but the firm remains steady. Rothschild & Co posts record advisory revenue in 2017. The shield still holds. That same year, you formally step down as chairman, passing the title to Alexandra, the seventh generation. At the ceremony in Paris, you hand him an old letter written by Nathan in 1815 after Waterloo. When the news reached London, I bought while others ran. Always look for truth before fear. Others nu minum vegetation. He smiles, folds the paper carefully and says, "Then I shall keep listening for it." Through the 2020s, the group expands further offices in Dubai, Shanghai, Sao Paulo. The Swiss branch under Ariane merges its investment arm with sustainable funds. The French and British branches focus on advisory and wealth management. Combined assets exceed 80 billion euros. Yet the structure remains deliberately conservative. No public debt, no hostile takeovers, no headlines. While others chase visibility, you preserve invisibility, the art that began with letters sent by courier, with seals pressed by candlelight. But it isn't set only banks and vineyards now. The Rothschild foundations, scattered across continents, support medical research, refugee assistance, climate adaptation, and education. In Israel, the Yad Hanadev Foundation, founded by Edmund in the 1920s, funds the Knesset building, the Supreme Court, and major universities. In France, the Fondation de Rothschild maintains hospitals and social programs. In Britain, Rothschild Foundation UK manages Waddesdon Manor, turning the old chateau into a living museum of art and horticulture. Everywhere, the same quiet philosophy, beauty and utility intertwined. By 2023, the Paris headquarters moves into a restored Hotel Particulier near the Rue Lafite, a symbolic return to the street where James once began. You attend the opening ceremony. Marble floors, soft string quartet, the faint scent of champagne. Reporters ask what the red shield means in a world of algorithms. You answer simply, continuity, nothing more mystical than that. They laugh, but you mean it. Continuity is the last form of magic. At night, you walk through the courtyard alone. The city glows against low clouds. A drizzle cools the air. You pass a bronze plaque engraved with the family motto, Concordia in integritas id, industria, harmony. Integrity, industry. 3 words that have outlived monarchies, revolutions, and the internet itself. You pause and listen to the rain tapping against stone. It sounds almost like the counting of coins on wood, or the ticking of an old clock. Somewhere in that rhythm, you hear your father Sip's voice again. Remember, David, wealth is measured not in what you own, but in how long your word remains good. And in the quiet of this century, amid the satellites and servers, you realize that the word still holds. You wake to the sound of rain brushing against the glass. It is 2025, a soft spring morning in Paris. The city is still half asleep. A few distant cars, the smell of wet pavement, a single cafe already grinding its first batch of beans. You sit at your desk inside the headquarters on Rue Lafite, the same street where 2 centuries ago James Mayer de Rothschild built his mansion and wrote his first contracts under Napoleon's gaze. The air carries the faint perfume of paper and coffee. On the wall opposite hangs a portrait of James, painted in 1835, the founder of the French branch, his hand resting on a letter sealed in red wax. Beneath it, the company SIP's motto gleams in silver letters: Concordia, Integritas, Industria. You trace the words with your eyes, feeling how they have survived every language, every border, every century. Harmony, integrity, industry, the 3 ingredients of endurance. Across the hall, the young analysts are already at their terminals. Their screens glow blue, lines of data racing faster than speech, yet the atmosphere is calm, almost reverent. They know the lineage they serve, even if they only half understand it. You sip your coffee and begin your day. It has been 13 years since the reunification of the French and British houses into one global partnership. Since then, the firm has grown quietly but steadily. 4,000 employees, 50 offices, and a reputation built not on volume but on judgment. You have advised governments on post-Brexit trade, guided energy companies through the transition to renewables, financed vaccination programs, and supported environmental funds on 3 continents. In Geneva, the Edmond de Rothschild Group, still led by Ariane de Rothschild, expands into Africa, investing in sustainable agriculture and clean water projects. In London, Rothschild & Co. remains the discreet advisor behind some of the largest mergers in Europe. And in Paris, your offices handle the great invisible business of the modern world, building stability in a time addicted to crisis. The modern world moves fast, but you know that speed is no guarantee of survival. Patience is. At midday you attend a private lunch at Waddesdon Manor in Buckinghamshire. The manor, once the weekend residence of Baron Ferdinand, now belongs partly to the National Trust, yet it still feels like family ground. You walk through the restored gardens, the scent of roses mingling with rain-soaked earth. The path curves toward a small bronze plaque near the fountain. To build is easy, to endure is art. You pause there, the sound of fountains echoing through the green silence. The others walk ahead. You linger, listening to the wind in the trees. For a moment, the centuries overlap. You imagine Ferdinand standing where you stand, adjusting the cuff of his coat, worrying about the next harvest or the next rumour. A historian once called the Rothschilds the architects of quiet empires. The phrase stays with you. Quietness, after all, is not absence of sound. It is the discipline of choosing when to speak. In the afternoon you meet with Alexandra, now chairman, in a sunlit room overlooking New Court, the rebuilt London headquarters. Through the window you see the same skyline Nathan once watched, St. Paul's dome still rising above the fog. Alexandra spreads a new report across the table. The firm's expansion into Asia-Pacific, the rise of Rothschild Capital Partners, the push toward ESG investment, and a proposal for digital archives. He says, "It's stat strange, isn't stat it? Everything changes, yet it feels like we've just written another line in the same letter." You nod. "The letter never ends," you reply. "We just keep passing the pen." Later, a flight takes you to Geneva for the annual family gathering. The house in Pregny, perched above the lake, glows in the early evening light. The garden smells of pine, lavender, and the faint mineral breath of water. Inside, 3 generations sit around the long table: bankers, vintners, philanthropists, scientists. Some wear suits, others denim. The conversations blend French, English, and German, the same mixture that once filled the Frankfurt ghetto, the London counting house, the Paris salons. Ariane raises her glass. To the future, she says, and to memory, may one never cancel the other. There's laughter, then silence. For a moment all you hear is the clinking of glasses and the low hum of wind through the open windows. After dinner, you step outside onto the terrace. The lake lies still under a blue-grey sky. Lights shimmer on the far shore. Lausanne, Vevey, Montreux, places that have seen revolutions come and go but never stopped reflecting the moon. You lean on the railing and breathe. The air smells of rain and cedar. You think of the journey that began with a red sign in Frankfurt, Rothschild, the red shield, and stretched across every border history could draw. Behind you, the house glows softly. Inside, a young cousin plays Chopin on the piano, the same nocturne that James once played in Paris nearly 2 centuries ago. The music drifts out through the windows, gentle, melancholy, human. The next morning you visit Chateau Lafite Rothschild. The vineyards are waking to spring, vines trimmed, soil freshly turned, the smell of moisture rising from the ground. The foreman greets you with a nod. His family has worked these rows for 3 generations. Good harvest this year, he says. Warm nights, steady rain. You walk between the vines, the sun warm on your shoulders. Each branch carries the memory of storms survived. Mildew, frost, war, neglect. Yet still they grow, season after season. In the cellar, barrels line the walls, marked with chalk 2020, 21, 2022. You run your hand over the wood, feeling the grain. Wine, like trust, takes years to mature, and one careless gesture to spoil. On a shelf nearby rests an old bottle labelled 1945, V for victory. The glass is dark, the label yellowed. You lift it gently, tracing the faded ink of its signature. You remember the story, the first post-war vintage, bottled in defiance, proof that beauty could rise again from rubble. You whisper to yourself, this was our real legacy, patience turned into flavour. Evening falls as you return to the manor house. A storm rolls in from the Atlantic. Thunder murmurs in the distance. You light a single lamp, open your notebook, and begin to write, not ledgers or memos, but memories. Heen 1744. Mayer Amschel is born in Frankfurt. 1815. Nathan's couriers crossed the Channel after Waterloo. 1855. Mouton enters the Bordeaux classification. 1875. Suez, purchased in 3 nights. 1945. Victory vintage bottled under occupation. 2012. The reunion of the arrows. The list continues until the page fills. You stare at the ink and realize that history, in its purest form, is not the story of nations, but of decisions repeated in faith. The decision to rebuild, to wait, to begin again. You close the notebook. The rain begins to fall harder. Now the room grows darker. The windows fog with the breath of night. The air smells faintly of rain, oak, and dust. The same scent that once filled counting rooms and libraries, cellars and archives. You breathe slowly, letting the centuries fade. The wars are over. The debts repaid. The rumours forgotten. Only the rhythm remains. The quiet continuity of hands passing work from one to another. You picture the red shield again. Not painted on a door, but glowing softly behind your eyelids. You see the coins, the letters, the vines, the candles, the ink. You hear the scratch of quills, the clink of glass, the murmur of distant rain. All the noise of history narrows to a single human sound, breath. The same breath that carried words across empires, across languages, across time. You are safe now. The story is whole. The world that began in a locked ghetto now sleeps under open skies. Let the noise dissolve. Let the heart beat slow. The empire of shadows has turned to light. Sweet dreams.